The battlefield stretched beneath a dying moon, its silver light bleeding through clouds of smoke and ash. 15 years ago, on this very ground, the world learned what it cost to be king. Kale remembered every detail. The screams of his warriors echoing through the mountain pass. The stench of blood mixing with winter frost. The shadow hunters moving through the darkness like death itself given form, their black blades drinking the moonlight and leaving only void in their wake. He was young then, 20 winters old, already a commander, already bearing the weight of 1,000 lives on his shoulders. His father, the Alpha King, had fallen 3 days prior, and the crown had passed to Kale in the middle of war. No ceremony, no celebration, just blood and duty and the desperate need to survive until dawn. Beside him stood Darius, his twin brother, his other half, the one soul in this world who understood the burden of being born to lead. Where Kale was fire and fury, Darius was calculation and calm. Where Kale charged into battle with his sword raised, Darius watched the flanks, anticipated the enemy, protected what his brother was too consumed by rage to see. They fought back to back that night, their wolves moving as one, their blades singing the same deadly song. For every shadow hunter that fell, 2 more seemed to rise from the darkness. The pass was narrow, the only road to their homeland, and if they failed here, their people would burn. Kale cut down another enemy, his arm already numb with exhaustion. Blood ran down his face from a wound he could not remember receiving. Beside him, Darius moved like liquid silver, his blade finding throats and hearts with precision that seemed almost gentle. Then the horn sounded. 3 blasts. The eastern flank had broken. Kale turned, his heart seizing in his chest, and saw the truth written in moonlight and shadow. Half their army was surrounded, cut off by a wave of shadow hunters that had somehow flanked their position. Hundreds of his wolves, his brothers, his responsibility, trapped and dying. And the only way to save them was to lead a charge through enemy lines, a charge that would leave Darius unprotected. Time stopped. Kale looked at his brother, and Darius looked back, and in that single glance, an entire conversation passed between them. The weight of duty, the price of leadership. The terrible mathematics of war, where sometimes saving the many meant sacrificing the few. Darius smiled. That same smile he had worn since childhood, the one that said he understood, that said he forgave, that said he would never blame his brother for what came next. Go, that smile said. They need you more than I do. Kale went. He led the charge through the shadow hunter lines, his wolf erupting from his body in a blaze of golden fury. He fought like a demon, like a god, like a king who had already lost everything and had nothing left to fear. His warriors rallied around him, inspired by his madness, and together they broke through the encirclement and saved 300 wolves from certain death. When he returned to the narrow pass, Darius was still standing. Barely. 5 shadow hunters lay dead around him, their black blood staining the snow. His brother had fought alone, held the line alone, refused to retreat even when his body screamed for mercy. But the 6th hunter had been too fast, too skilled, and the black blade had found its mark. Kale caught Darius as he fell. The wound was mortal. They both knew it. The blade had pierced his heart, that forbidden poison of the shadow hunters already spreading through his veins. No healer could save him. No magic could undo what had been done. Darius looked up at his brother, his eyes still clear despite the pain, still holding that same gentle understanding that had defined him since birth. You saved them, he whispered. You did what a king must do. Kale could not speak. His throat had closed around words that would never be enough. His hands pressed against the wound, as if his will alone could stop the bleeding, could rewind time, could undo the choice that had brought them here. Darius raised a trembling hand and touched his brother's face. Do not let your heart die with me, he said. Promise me, Kale. Promise me you will find something worth living for. Not just existing, living. Then his hand fell and his eyes closed, and Kale felt half of his soul tear away and disappear into the void. His wolf howled that night, a sound of such agony that wolves across the continent raised their heads and shivered. Then, as dawn broke over the mountain pass and the last of the shadow hunters retreated into the darkness, his wolf fell silent. It had not spoken since. General Varen found him on the training grounds, as he did most nights when sleep refused to come. The old warrior had been Darius's closest friend, had stood beside both brothers in that final battle, had helped carry the body home when it was over. He was the only one left who remembered who KO used to be. "The council is getting restless," Varen said, leaning against the stone pillar with the casual ease of a man who had long since stopped fearing his king. "They want a Luna. They want heirs. They want assurance that the kingdom will not crumble when you finally push yourself into an early grave." Kale did not stop his training. His blade sang through the air, cutting at shadows, cutting at memories, cutting at the phantom of a brother who still haunted his dreams. "Let them want." Varen sighed. "The war with the shadow hunters is not over, Kale. They are rebuilding. Every scout report says the same thing. They will come for us again, and when they do, we will need more than your fury to survive." The blade paused mid-swing. Kyle turned to face his general, his oldest remaining friend, and the cold mask of kingship flickered for just a moment. "What would you have me do, Varen?" "Choose some noble's daughter who smiles at me with dead eyes and calls me husband while counting the days until she can rule in my stead. Bind myself to someone who sees only the crown and never the man." Varen met his gaze without flinching. "I would have you find a reason to live, my king. Not just exist. Not just endure. Darius asked you to live, and you have spent every day since then slowly dying." The name struck like a blade. Kale turned Horway and his jaw tight, his hands gripping his sword until his knuckles whitened. He did not speak. He did not have to. The silence said everything. Varen pushed himself off the pillar and walked toward the door. "There is a ceremony tomorrow night at Silvervale Pack. The blood moon rises, and their young wolves will undergo the awakening. It would be a strategic opportunity to assess their strength for the alliance we have been negotiating." At the door, Varen paused. "And perhaps, my king, you might see something there worth protecting. Something that reminds you why we fight at all." Then he was gone, and Kale was alone with his sword and his silence, and the ghost of a promise he had never been able to keep. Far from the iron walls of the citadel, beneath the same dying moon, two sisters lay in the darkness of their shared chamber and dreamed very different dreams. Seraphina dreamed of running, not away from something, but toward it. Toward a light she could not name, a voice she could not hear, a belonging she had never known. In her dream, her wolf ran beside her, silver and strong, and for one perfect moment, she was whole. Then she woke, and the dream shattered like it always did, and she was left with nothing but the cold certainty that her wolf would never answer her call. Across the room, Ravenna did not dream at all. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind turning over plans and possibilities and the bitter taste of a lifetime spent in her sister's shadow. They had been born on the same night, beneath the same blood moon, into the same cry of their mother's final breath. The oracle had given everything to bring them into the world, had spent the last of her power ensuring that both daughters would survive, had left behind only a locked box and a whispered prophecy that no one fully understood. The box went to Seraphina. Ravenna had never forgotten that. Their mother, in her final moments, had looked past the strong daughter, the fierce daughter, the daughter who had clawed her way out first and screamed her dominance to the world. She had looked past all of that and given her greatest treasure to the quiet one. Tomorrow night would change everything. The blood moon ceremony would reveal the truth that Ravenna had always known. Seraphina's wolf would fail to answer, as it always did, and the pack would finally see what Ravenna saw. And Marcus would see it too. Marcus, with his broad shoulders and honest eyes, his warrior's hands, and his quiet devotion. Marcus, who had chosen Seraphina despite Ravenna being stronger, faster, more capable in every way that mattered. Tomorrow night, he would see the truth. And when he did, he would finally understand that he had chosen wrong. The morning came too quickly for Seraphina, and not quickly enough for Ravenna. The pack buzzed with preparation. Servants hung silver banners from every window. Warriors polished their ceremonial armor until it gleamed. The scent of roasting meat drifted from the great hall, where the feast would be held after the awakening. Serafina stood before her mirror, her fingers trembling as she fastened the clasps of her ceremonial gown. The fabric was woven with threads of moonlight silk, pale and shimmering, chosen specifically to honor the goddess who would either bless or curse her tonight. Please, she whispered to her reflection, just this once. Let me be enough. A knock at the door made her turn. Marcus entered, his ceremonial armor catching the candlelight, his face carefully arranged into an expression of confidence that did not quite reach his eyes. He crossed the room and took her hands in his. Whatever happens tonight, he said, I want you to know that I chose you. Not your wolf, not your power, you. Serafina searched his face for doubt and found only sincerity. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love could be enough to overcome the failure written in her blood. But she had seen the way the elders looked at her, had heard the whispers that followed her through the halls. Wolfless, they called her when they thought she could not hear. Broken, cursed. She pushed the thoughts away and forced a smile. Thank you, she said, for believing in me. Marcus kissed her forehead, a gesture of tenderness that felt almost like goodbye. Then he left to join the other warriors, and Serafina was alone again with her fear. In the shadows of the hallway, Ravenna watched her sister's betrothed walk away. She had heard every word of their conversation, had seen the way Marcus looked at Serafina, with that soft devotion that should have been hers. Tonight, Ravenna thought, that devotion would cost him everything. The moon rose like blood, fat and red and pulsing with ancient power. It hung low over Silver Vale as the entire pack gathered in the stone circle. Torches flickered in the night wind, casting dancing shadows across faces young and old. The drums began their thunderous rhythm, and the air itself seemed to thicken with anticipation. Serafina stood at the edge of the circle, her heart pounding so hard she feared it might crack her ribs. Around her, the other young wolves of her generation shifted nervously, their excitement and fear mingling in a sense so strong it was almost visible. In moments, the awakening would begin. In moments, she would finally know if the moon goddess had blessed her or abandoned her. Beside her, Ravenna stood perfectly still. Her crimson gown caught the torchlight, making her look like a flame given human form. She did not fidget, did not pray. She simply waited with the confidence of someone who had never known doubt. The seer raised her staff, and the drums fell silent. Under the blood moon, the young wolves of Silver Vale shall rise and shift. Their souls shall merge with their beasts, and their strength shall bind the pack anew. Power rippled through the clearing. Serafina felt it wash over her skin like a wave of electricity, demanding entrance, demanding response. Around her, bodies began to transform. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur erupted from flesh. The night filled with the symphony of wolves being born. Ravenna arched her back, a gasp escaping her lips as her wolf surged forward. The transformation was glorious. Her fur was black as midnight, her eyes twin flames of gold. She stood proud and powerful, every inch the alpha female she had always known herself to be. The crowd roared their approval. Then the attention shifted. Serafina stood motionless, her eyes closed, her hands pressed to her heart. The magic danced across her skin, circling, probing, trying to find a way in. She could feel her wolf somewhere deep inside her, pacing behind a wall she could not see or touch or break. Please, she begged silently, please answer me. Something stirred, a whisper, faint as morning mist. Not yet. Then nothing. The seconds stretched into eternity. The crowd's approval turned to confusion, then to pity, then to something crueler. Whispers spread like poison through the gathering. She is defective, still voiceless. Perhaps she was never meant to shift. Serafina opened her eyes and saw the truth written on every face. The confirmation of everything she had feared. The proof that she was exactly what they had always said she was. Nothing. Ravenna stepped forward, still in her wolf form, and the crowd parted before her. She shifted back to human with fluid grace, her naked skin catching the moonlight as she reached for a ceremonial robe. When she spoke, her voice carried across the clearing with the precision of a knife. Perhaps the moon has forgotten some of her children. Gasps, nervous laughter. Someone in the crowd muttered Wolfless loud enough for everyone to hear. Serafina wanted to run, wanted to disappear into the darkness and never return. But her legs would not move, and her pride would not let her flee, so she simply stood there, frozen, as her twin sister circled her like prey. Ravenna turned to Marcus, her eyes glittering. "Tell me, warrior, is this the Luna you would give to Silver Veil, a woman whose own wolf refuses to acknowledge her?" Marcus stood at the edge of the circle, his face a battlefield of warring emotions. Love and duty, heart and honor. The choice he had sworn would never come to this. He looked at Serafina, and she saw the moment his resolve cracked. Saw the weight of expectation finally crush the love he had promised. Saw him calculate the cost of standing beside her and find the price too high. "The pack needs a strong Luna," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I choose Ravenna." The words struck Serafina like physical blows. Her knees buckled. Her vision blurred. The world tilted on its axis, and she felt herself falling into a darkness from which there would be no return. Then a voice cut through the chaos, a voice like thunder and ice in the finality of death itself. Silence. The word was not shouted. It was simply spoken, and yet it carried more authority than any command Serafina had ever heard. The entire clearing fell still. Even the torches seemed to dim, as if fire itself recognized a superior force. From the shadows at the edge of the circle, a figure emerged. Serafina had heard stories of the Alpha King. Every wolf had. He was legend made flesh, the ruler of Iron Citadel, the warrior who had held the mountain pass against 1,000 shadow hunters and walked away with their blood on his blade. They said his wolf was the largest ever born. They said his eyes could see into souls. They had not mentioned that his presence alone could steal the breath from her lungs. Kale descended the stone steps into the circle, and the crowd parted before him like water before a blade. He moved with the controlled grace of a predator, each step deliberate, each motion carrying the weight of absolute authority. His black armor absorbed the torchlight. His golden eyes burned with an intensity that made strong warriors look away. But he was not looking at the warriors. He was looking at her. Serafina could not move, could not breathe, could not understand why the most powerful wolf in existence was crossing the circle toward her with that terrible focus in his gaze. He stopped before her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the scent of winter forests and forged steel that clung to his skin. "You look at her and see weakness," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the clearing. "You mock her because her wolf has not spoken." He turned his head slowly, taking in the crowd, the elders, the warriors, the twin sister who had orchestrated this humiliation. His lip curled with contempt. "You are fools." The word landed like a slap. Someone in the crowd made a sound of protest, then quickly fell silent as those golden eyes swept in their direction. Kale turned back to Serafina. This close, she could see the scar that ran along his jaw, the exhaustion hidden beneath the mask of authority, the depth of something ancient and wounded in his gaze. "I look at you," he said, quieter now, almost gentle, "and I see something my wolf has waited years to find." He raised his hand and placed it against her neck. The touch was warm and electric and impossible. Power surged through the connection, not his power, but something older, something that had slept inside her since birth and now recognized its awakening. The mark blazed to life. Not gold, as mate marks usually appeared. Silver, pure and brilliant and blinding. The color of the primal moon of prophecy, of destiny itself. Serafina gasped as the light consumed her vision. She could feel the bond forming, feel herself being claimed in a way that went beyond flesh and blood. Somewhere deep inside her, behind that invisible wall, her wolf stirred and began to howl. "Not yet," the wolf whispered again. "But soon." When the light faded, the clearing had changed. Wolves who had been standing were now kneeling. Elders who had whispered of her weakness were pressing their foreheads to the stone. Even Ravenna had dropped to one knee, her face pale with shock. Only Kale remained standing, his hand still pressed to her neck, his eyes never leaving hers. "She is Luna of Iron Citadel," he announced, his voice ringing with finality. "My mate, my equal. Any who disagree may speak now, and I will hear your objection with my blade." No one spoke. No one dared. In the silence that followed, Serafina looked up at the stranger who had just claimed her and found herself wondering if she had been saved or merely traded one cage for another. The journey to Iron Citadel took 3 days. Serafina spent most of it in the royal carriage, watching the landscape transform through the window. Rolling hills gave way to rocky cliffs. Green forests yielded to snow and ice. The further north they traveled, the colder the world became, until even the air itself seemed to carry the bite of something ancient and unforgiving. She barely saw Kael during the journey. He rode at the head of the column, his black wolf form eating up the miles with tireless determination. When they stopped to rest, he disappeared into his tent without a word. It was General Varen who kept her company. The old warrior rode beside her carriage on a gray mare, his weathered face occasionally appearing at the window with cups of hot tea and dry observations about the territory they crossed. "Those mountains ahead are called the Teeth," he said on the second morning, gesturing toward a jagged range that seemed to scrape the sky. "Your new home sits at their heart. Iron Citadel has stood for 1,000 years and never fallen to siege." Serafina wrapped her hands around the warm cup and tried to find comfort in its heat. Why did he choose me? Varen was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "That," he said finally, "is a question only Kael can answer. And getting words out of him is harder than getting blood from stone." He glanced at her, and something in his expression softened. "But I will tell you this, girl. I have known him for 20 years. I fought beside him in wars that would make your nightmares seem pleasant. In all that time, I have never seen his wolf react to anyone the way it reacted to you. Whatever he saw in you, whatever made him cross that circle and claim you before 1,000 witnesses, it was not a decision he made lightly." Serafina did not know whether to find comfort in those words or terror. When they finally reached Iron Citadel, she understood why it was called a fortress and not a castle. The structure rose from the mountain like an extension of the stone itself, black and massive and utterly impregnable. Walls 30 feet thick guarded every approach. Watchtowers stood at precise intervals, their arrow slits like narrow eyes watching the world for threats. The gates were iron-banded oak, so heavy that teams of wolves were required to open them. This was not a home, this was a military installation. Serafina felt her heart sink as the carriage passed through the gates and entered the main courtyard. Warriors in black armor lined the walls, their faces hidden behind helmets, their discipline absolute. No one spoke. No one moved without purpose. Kael was waiting for her at the base of the main stair. He had shifted back to human form and changed into simple black clothing that did nothing to diminish his presence. His face was unreadable as he watched her step down from the carriage, his golden eyes tracking her every movement. "Welcome to Iron Citadel," he said. His voice was neutral, distant. "Your chambers have been prepared. My staff will see to your needs." He turned to leave. "Wait." The word escaped before she could stop it. Kael paused, his back still to her, and Serafina forced herself to continue despite the fear tightening her throat. "You claimed me in front of my entire pack. You marked me as your mate. You brought me across the world to this place. And now you will simply walk away without explanation?" Slowly, Kael turned. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then something flickered in his expression. Not warmth, exactly, but perhaps respect for her courage. "You will have your explanation," he said, "when you are ready to hear it. For now, rest. The journey was long, and tomorrow you will begin your training." "Training?" He was already walking away. "A Luna of Iron Citadel must know how to defend herself. General Varen will instruct you." Then he was gone, swallowed by the shadows of the fortress, and Serafina was left standing alone in a courtyard full of strangers, wondering what exactly she had gotten herself into. That night, sleep would not come. Serafina lay in her new chambers, staring at a ceiling made of black stone, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a fortress preparing for rest. Distant shouts of changing guards, the creak of armor, the howl of wind through narrow windows. Finally, she gave up on sleep and rose from her bed. The fortress was quieter now, most of its inhabitants having retired for the night. She wrapped a robe around her shoulders and slipped into the corridor, telling herself she simply needed to walk, to burn off the restless energy that hummed through her veins. She found the training hall by following the sound of steel on leather. It was a massive space, carved directly into the mountain, its walls lined with weapons of every description. Torches burned low in their sconces, casting long shadows across the floor. And in the center of that floor, KL fought his demons. He was shirtless, his scarred torso gleaming with sweat, his blade moving through forms so complex they seemed more like dance than combat. Each strike was precise. Each movement carried lethal intent. He fought with the dedication of someone who had long ago realized that stopping meant remembering, and remembering meant drowning. Serafina watched from the shadows, barely breathing. But what struck her most was not his strength. It was his loneliness. In every movement, she could see it. The isolation of a man who had made himself into a weapon because there was nothing left to be. The exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for so long that he no longer remembered any other way to exist. She must have made some sound because suddenly his blade was at her throat, his golden eyes blazing with lethal intent. Then recognition flickered, and the blade dropped. "What are you doing here?" His voice was rough with exertion or perhaps something else. "I could not sleep," Serafina said quietly, "and I wanted to understand." "Understand what?" "Who you are, why you chose me, what this place is." Kale turned away, reaching for a cloth to wipe the sweat from his face. The scars on his back told stories she could not read. Battles she had not witnessed, pain she had not shared. "This place," he said finally, "is the only thing standing between our world and extinction. The Shadow Hunters are rebuilding. Within a decade, perhaps less, they will return in force. When they do, Iron Citadel will be the first line of defense. And me, what am I in this war?" He was silent for a long moment. Then he moved toward a door at the far end of the training hall. A door she had not noticed before, half hidden in shadow. "Come," he said, "if you want answers, you will have them." Serafina followed. The door led to a small chamber carved into the heart of the mountain. It was cold here, colder than anywhere else in the fortress, and the torchlight seemed dimmer, as if even fire struggled to burn in this place. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. Armor, mounted on a stand, sized for a young warrior. A sword broken in two, its pieces laid carefully on black velvet. Letters, dozens of them, bundled with faded ribbon. And a portrait, painted in oils, of a young man with golden eyes and a gentle smile. A young man who looked exactly like Kale. "His name was Darius," Kale said from behind her. "My twin brother. He died holding a past that should have been impossible to hold, buying time for me to save our army." Serafina turned to look at him. In the dim light, she could see something crack in his expression. The mask of authority slipping to reveal the devastation beneath. "I had to choose," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Save the army or save my brother. I chose the army. 300 wolves lived because of that choice. Darius died because of it." He crossed to the broken sword and touched it gently. "His last words to me were a request. He asked me not to let my heart die with him." His hand fell away. "I have failed that request every single day." My wolf went silent the moment he closed his eyes. "I have not felt anything since, not joy, not hope, not connection to any living soul." He turned to face her, and his eyes burned with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Until you, when I saw you standing in that circle, being torn apart by wolves who should have protected you, something inside me woke up. My wolf, silent since my brother's death, roared for the first time." He took a step closer. "I did not choose you for love, Serafina. I do not know if I am capable of love anymore. I chose you because, for the first time in years, my wolf believed there was something worth protecting. Someone worth fighting for." He stopped, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body despite the cold of the chamber. "I cannot promise you happiness. I cannot promise you warmth or tenderness or any of the things a mate should give. But I can promise you this. No one will ever hurt you again. No one will ever mock you or abandon you or make you feel worthless. As long as I breathe, you will be protected." Serafina looked into the eyes of this broken king, this wounded warrior, this man who had lost everything and rebuilt himself into something hard and cold and unyielding. She saw the pain he carried, the guilt that haunted him, the desperate hope he was afraid to acknowledge. And for the first time since her own wolf had refused to answer, she felt something other than despair. She reached out and touched his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. "Your brother asked you to live," she said softly. "Not just exist. Perhaps that is what I'm here for. Not to be protected, but to remind you how to live again." Kale stared at her, and something flickered in his golden eyes. Something that might have been the first spark of warmth in years of winter. Neither of them knew what the future held. Neither of them understood the prophecy that connected their fates or the enemies who were already moving against them. But in that moment, in that cold chamber, surrounded by the memories of the dead, two broken souls reached out and found in each other the possibility of something more. Outside the fortress walls, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying with it the whisper of war to come. In the shadows of distant lands, shadow hunters sharpened their blades and spoke of an oracle who had finally been found. And in the halls of Silvervale, a twin sister with eyes like golden flames stared at the moon and made plans of her own. The storm was gathering. But for now, for this one fragile moment, there was only the silence of the chamber and the warmth of two hands meeting in the dark. And somewhere deep inside Serafina, behind a wall that had stood for 20 years, her wolf lifted its head and smiled. Soon, it whispered, very soon. The wooden training sword connected with her ribs for the 15th time that morning. Serafina hit the ground hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Above her, the winter sun glared down without warmth, its pale light offering nothing but illumination for her failures. Around the training yard, warriors paused in their own exercises to watch, their expressions ranging from pity to contempt. General Varen stood over her, his own practice sword resting casually against his shoulder. He was not even breathing hard. "Again," he said. Serafina pushed herself to her feet. Her arms trembled with exhaustion. Her ribs screamed where the blows had landed. Every muscle in her body begged for mercy, for rest, for the simple dignity of admitting defeat. She raised her sword. Varen did not smile, but something flickered in his weathered eyes, something that might have been approval. The next blow came faster than she could track. She tried to block, failed, and felt the wooden edge slam into her shoulder. She stumbled but did not fall. The blow after that caught her thigh. The one after that glanced off her forearm, but she stayed on her feet. 10 minutes later, when Varen finally called a halt, Serafina was covered in bruises and soaked in sweat. She had not landed a single hit. She had not even come close. But she had remained standing, and for now that had to be enough. Varen handed her a water skin. "You are weak," he said bluntly. "Slower than a Chahaon. Your form is terrible. Your instincts are wrong, and you telegraph every attack like you are sending a written invitation." Serafina drank deeply, waiting for the rest. "But you do not quit." He studied her with those sharp eyes that had seen 100 battles. "I have trained warriors for 30 years. Half of them would have stayed down after that third hit. A quarter would have made excuses after the first. You got up 15 times. He took back the water skin. "Tomorrow we work on footwork. Your attacks are hopeless, but perhaps we can teach you to survive long enough to matter." Then he walked away, leaving Serafina alone in the training yard with her pain and her small, fragile victory. The days blurred together after that. Every morning before dawn, Serafina reported to the training yard. Every morning, Varen knocked her down again and again. Every morning, she got back up. She learned quickly that she would never match the warriors of Iron Citadel in strength or speed. Her body simply was not built for it. Where they had been training since childhood, she was starting from nothing. Where they had wolves to enhance their reflexes and power, she had only her own fragile human form. But she had something else. She had a mind that would not stop working, even when her body screamed for surrender. After each session, she began staying behind, watching the other warriors train, studying their movements, analyzing their patterns. She noticed that the largest warriors tended to overcommit to their swings, leaving them vulnerable for half a heartbeat after each attack. She observed that the fastest fighters often sacrifice balance for speed, making them susceptible to trips and throws. She started keeping notes. At night, alone in her chambers, she drew diagrams of footwork patterns and listed the weaknesses she had identified. She could not outfight these warriors. But perhaps, with enough observation, she could outthink them. Varen noticed. He found her one evening in the corner of the training yard, sketching the movements of two warriors sparring nearby. He watched her for a long moment, then sat down beside her. "What are you doing?" "Learning," she said simply. He looked at her notes, the precise diagrams, the analytical observations. His eyebrows rose. "You are trying to find patterns. Everything has patterns." She did not look up from her sketching. People think fighting is about strength and speed, but it is really about prediction. If you know what your opponent will do before they do it, you do not need to be stronger or faster. Varen was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and offered her his hand. "Come with me." He led her to a different part of the training complex. A smaller room filled not with weapons, but with maps and tactical displays. This was where the commanders planned their battles, where strategy was valued over brute force. "If you cannot be a sword," Varen said, "perhaps you can be a mind. Let us see if you can think like a general." The tactical lessons became her sanctuary. Every afternoon after her body had been broken in physical training, Seraphina sat with Varen and studied the art of war. She learned about supply lines and terrain advantages. She studied famous battles, analyzing why the victors won and the losers fell. She played strategy games against Varen, losing at first, then gradually improving until she could sometimes force a draw. She discovered she had a gift for seeing connections others missed. Varen presented her with a war scenario. A fortified position under siege, running low on supplies, with enemy reinforcements approaching from the east. Every conventional solution he proposed, she found a flaw in. Every standard tactic, she identified a counter. Finally, she suggested something no one had considered. A controlled retreat through seemingly impassable terrain, using the approaching enemy reinforcements as unwitting cover for an escape that would leave the besiegers holding an empty fortress while the defenders regrouped elsewhere. Varen stared at the map for a long time. "That," he said slowly, "is either brilliant or insane. Is there a difference?" He laughed, a genuine laugh, the first she had heard from him. "You know," he said, "I am beginning to understand why the king chose you." Word of her progress reached Kale. He began appearing at her training sessions, not participating, just watching from the shadows. His presence was unnerving at first. She would catch glimpses of him in the corner of her vision, those golden eyes tracking her every movement, and her concentration would shatter. But gradually she grew accustomed to his observation, even began to draw strength from it. One evening, after a particularly grueling tactical session, she found him waiting outside the command room. "Varen tells me you have a talent for strategy." She fell into step beside him, too exhausted to be surprised by his sudden appearance. "I have a talent for surviving," she said. "Strategy is just survival applied to larger scales." Kale made a sound that might have been agreement. They walked in silence through the fortress corridors. This had become a pattern over the past weeks. He would appear at random moments, fall into step beside her, and they would walk together without speaking. At first, she had found it awkward. Now she found it comforting. He stopped at a window overlooking the mountain range. "The shadow hunters attacked through that pass," he said, gesturing toward a distant gap in the peaks. 12,000 of them against our 3,000. Seraphina studied the terrain with new eyes. The tactical implications were immediately apparent. The pass is narrow. It negates their numerical advantage. Kale nodded. "That is what I thought as well. Hold the pass, bleed them dry, wait for reinforcements." A sound strategy. But something went wrong. His jaw tightened. They had learned to flank through the mountains. Paths we thought were impassable. While I held the pass, they circled behind and cut off half my army. The choice you had to make. He did not answer. He did not have to. They stood together in the fading light, two people bound by fate and circumstance, learning to understand each other one silence at a time. 3 weeks after her arrival, the council convened. The chamber was carved from the heart of the mountain itself. Black stone walls rose to vaulted ceilings. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled lords and commanders. At the head of the chamber, on a throne of dark iron, sat Kael, and beside him, for the first time, sat Seraphina. The chair felt too large. The eyes on her felt too heavy. But she kept her spine straight and her expression neutral, just as Varen had taught her. The council session began with reports from the borders. Troop movements, supply tallies, diplomatic communications from allied pacts. Routine matters that required the king's attention, but not his intervention. Then Elder Mordecai rose to speak. He was ancient, this advisor. His hair was white as winter snow, his face a map of wrinkles and hidden knowledge. He had served 3 generations of kings, and his voice carried the weight of that long service. But his eyes, when they fell on Seraphina, were cold and calculating. "My king," he began, his tone dripping with false respect, "I must raise a concern that weighs heavily on the hearts of many in this chamber." He paused, letting the silence build. "The matter of your Luna." Kael's expression did not change, but Seraphina felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "Continue." Mordecai bowed his head in mock humility. "We have welcomed your maid into our fortress. We have provided her with training, with quarters, with every comfort a Luna deserves. But 3 weeks have passed, and still she cannot shift. Still her wolf remains silent." He spread his hands in a gesture of helpless concern. "The soldiers whisper. The servants talk. They wonder if our king has been bewitched, or if perhaps some darker magic is at work. A Luna without a wolf is unprecedented. Some say it is an ill omen." Seraphina felt the words like knives, each one finding its mark. But she had been cut before. She had learned that bleeding was not the same as dying. "What would you have me do, Elder?" Kael's voice was dangerously quiet. "Nothing rash, of course." Mordecai smiled, a serpent's smile. "But perhaps a demonstration of her worth would silence the doubters. A test of some kind." Before Kael could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A warrior strode in, his armor bearing the insignia of a foreign pack. He was massive, even by wolf standards, with arms like tree trunks and a scar that bisected his face from forehead to jaw. Behind him came a retinue of equally imposing fighters. "Alpha Blackwood," Mordecai said, sounding not at all surprised. "What an unexpected honor." Blackwood ignored the elder, his eyes fixed on Kael with the hunger of a predator, scenting weakness. "I have come to challenge the supposed mate of the Alpha King," he announced. "According to the old laws, any wolf may challenge a Luna's claim if they believe her unworthy. I believe your Luna is not only unworthy, but an insult to every wolf who ever drew breath." The chamber erupted into chaos. Warriors reached for weapons. Advisors shouted objections. The noise built to a crescendo that threatened to shake the stone itself. Kael raised one hand and silence fell like a blade. He rose from his throne, and even Blackwood took an involuntary step backward. The Alpha King descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing in the sudden quiet. "You dare," Kael said softly, "to enter my fortress and insult my mate?" "I dare because the law allows it." Blackwood stood his ground, though sweat had begun to bead on his forehead. "The challenge is my right. Unless she proves otherwise, that shame will follow you forever." Kael's hand moved toward his blade. "Wait." Seraphina's voice cut through the tension. Every eye in the chamber turned to her. She stood, smoothing her dress with hands that did not tremble, and descended from the dais to stand between the 2 alpha males. "You invoke the old laws," she said, addressing Blackwood directly. "Do you know them fully? Or only the parts that serve your purpose?" Blackwood's lip curled. "I know them well enough, Wolfless." "Then you know that a challenge to a Luna must be answered by the Luna herself." Seraphina's voice carried clearly through the chamber. Not by her mate, not by her guards, by her own hand. She saw the flicker of satisfaction in Blackwood's eyes. This was what he wanted, a chance to humiliate her publicly. But she was not finished. "You also know," she continued, "that the challenge party chooses the terms of combat. The challenger names the prize. The challenge names the field." Blackwood's smile faltered slightly. "I choose the field of strategy," Seraphina said. "A war game. Your tactical mind against mine. Whoever wins the scenario wins the challenge." The chamber fell absolutely silent. Blackwood stared at her, his face reddening with anger. "You would turn a combat challenge into a game of moving pieces? I would use the law exactly as it is written." Seraphina met his gaze without flinching. "Unless you are afraid that your mind is not as strong as your muscles." The insult landed perfectly. Blackwood could not refuse without looking like a coward, could not accept without risking defeat at the hands of a woman half his size. Either way, he was trapped. His jaw worked silently. Then, with a growl of frustration, he turned and stormed from the chamber, his retinue scrambling to follow. "This is not over," he snarled from the doorway. Serafina watched him go, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. "No," she said quietly, "it is not." When the doors closed, the chamber remained frozen for a long moment. Then Varen began to laugh, a deep rumbling sound that broke the tension like shattering ice. "Well played, Luna." He raised his fist to his chest in salute. "Well played indeed." Even Mordecai looked shaken, his carefully laid trap turned against him. But it was Kael's expression that Serafina found herself searching for. He stood where Blackwood had left him, his golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He did not speak, did not need to. The pride in his gaze said everything. That night, her wolf finally spoke clearly. Serafina had been lying awake, replaying the confrontation in her mind, when she felt it. A stirring deep inside her. A presence that had always been there, but had remained hidden behind walls she could not see. "You are not weak." The voice was feminine but fierce, wild but controlled. It resonated through her consciousness like the tolling of a great bell. "You were sealed." Serafina sat up in bed, her heart racing. "Sealed? What do you mean sealed?" "Your mother knew what you were, what we are together. She knew the danger it would bring. So she bound us, locked us away, until you found someone strong enough to protect us." The words tumbled through her mind, each one unlocking memories she had not known she possessed. Her mother's final moments. The whispered words the midwife had never understood. The lockbox that had been pressed into Serafina's infant hands. The box. She scrambled from her bed and crossed to the chest where she kept her few precious belongings from home. The box sat at the bottom, small and unassuming, its lock refusing to yield to any key she had tried. But now, as her fingers touched the surface, she felt something respond. A warmth that had not been there before. A recognition. The lock clicked open. Inside, she found a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age, and beneath it, a small vial of dried blood. She opened the journal and began to read. Her mother's handwriting filled the pages. Elegant script that told a story Serafina had never known. A story that changed everything. Her mother had been an oracle. The last of a dying bloodline, gifted with the ability to see the threads of fate and follow them into the future. It was a power that the Shadowhunters had hunted to extinction, killing every oracle they found, because oracles could see their plans before they unfolded. When her mother became pregnant with twins, she had looked into the future and seen two paths. In one, Serafina's power awakened early. She became a target. Shadowhunters found her before she was ready. She died screaming, and the world burned. In the other, her power remained sealed until she found a protector. A mate whose strength could shield her while she learned to control what she was. In this future, there was hope. Her mother had chosen the second path. With the last of her strength, she had bound Serafina's wolf, locked away her oracle abilities, made her appear ordinary, made her appear weak, made her a target for mockery rather than murder. The seal was tied to blood. Only when Serafina's blood mingled with her mother's preserved essence in a moment of true need would the binding break. Serafina closed the journal with trembling hands. She was not broken, had never been broken. She was hidden. And now, finally, she understood why. Morning found her in Kael's war room, the journal spread between them. He read in silence, his expression growing darker with each page. When he finished, he looked up at her with eyes that held a fury barely contained. "They hunted your kind to extinction. Yes, and now you are here in my fortress, where any spy could report your existence." Serafina met his gaze steadily. "The seal holds. My wolf speaks to me now, but I cannot shift, cannot access what I truly am. Not yet. Not until your blood meets hers." She touched the vial that hung now on a cord around her neck. "My mother wrote that it must happen in a moment of true need. The seal cannot be forced. It must be broken by necessity, not desire." Kael stood and moved to the window. "If they learn what you are, they will come for you with everything they have, not an army, and extermination. Then we do not let them learn. How? He crossed back to her. Mordecai is already suspicious. Every spy and informant in the territory will be watching you now. Serafina stood and faced him without flinching. Then we give them something else to watch. We make them believe I am exactly what they think I am. A political bride, a strategic alliance. Nothing more dangerous than a woman who got lucky. And in the meantime, I continue training, continue learning, continue preparing for the day when the seal breaks and I have to be ready for what comes next. Kael studied her for a long moment. You know this path may lead to war. I know. And still you choose it. She reached out and placed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady rhythm beneath her palm. I choose it because you taught me something these past weeks. You taught me that there are things worth fighting for. This kingdom, these people, you. His hand came up to cover hers. When I claimed you, he said, quietly, I told you I could not promise love. I told you I did not know if I was capable of it anymore. I remember. I think I was wrong. The words hung between them, fragile and profound. Before Serafina could respond, the door burst open. Varen stood in the entrance, his face grave. Forgive the interruption, my king, but a delegation has arrived from Silver Vale. He paused. Lady Ravenna demands an audience. The great hall had been prepared for a diplomatic reception. Banners hung from the rafters. The long table was laden with food and wine. Servants stood ready to attend to every need. It was all very proper, very formal, very much a lie. Serafina stood at Kael's side as the doors opened and her twin sister entered. Ravenna wore a gown of deep crimson that complemented her dark hair and golden eyes. Her chin was high, her bearing regal, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. Behind her came a retinue of Silver Vale warriors and, Serafina noted with growing unease, Elder Mordecai. Sister? Ravenna's voice was honeyed poison. How wonderful to see you thriving in your new home. Serafina inclined her head. Ravenna, this is unexpected. Is it? Ravenna swept into the hall as if she owned it. I would think you would expect me to check on my dear twin. Her eyes flickered to Kael. And to pay my respects to the Alpha King, of course. The ruler who chose my sister over all the worthy candidates in his kingdom. I simply had to meet him for myself. Kael's expression remained stone. You are welcome in Iron Citadel, Lady Ravenna, though your arrival without advance notice is irregular. Forgive me. Ravenna's smile did not waver. I feared that if I announced my visit, my sister might find reason to prevent it. The feast proceeded with excruciating formality. Ravenna played her role perfectly, charming the assembled nobles with wit and beauty. She spoke of her concerns for her sister, her hopes for continued alliance between their packs. Every word was a probe, every smile was a test. And through it all, Mordecai watched with those calculating eyes, noting every reaction, filing away every detail. When the formal dinner concluded, Ravenna rose from her seat. I find myself restless after the long journey, she announced. Perhaps my sister would walk with me. We have so much to catch up on. It was not a request. Serafina stood. Of course. She felt Kael's gaze on her back as she left the hall, and she knew he would have warriors following at a discreet distance. But she also knew that some battles had to be fought alone. The sisters walked through the fortress corridors in silence, their footsteps echoing off the stone. Finally, when they were far from listening ears, Ravenna dropped her mask. You think you have won something here, she said, her voice cold and flat. You think that because a king touched your neck and called you Luna, you are safe. You are wrong. Serafina kept walking. I never thought I was safe, Ravenna. I never thought I had won anything. But here you are, living in a fortress, wearing silk and jewels, training with generals, while I rule a pack that whispers behind my back. Is that why you came? To tell me how hard your victory has been? Ravenna stopped walking. I came because Mordecai offered me something better than Silver Vale. He offered me everything you have stolen from me. Serafina turned to face her sister. I never stole anything from you, Ravenna. You stole our mother's love. Ravenna's voice cracked. The box. The one thing she thought to give you. What was in it? What secret did our mother hide from me? Nothing that concerns you. Everything about you concerns me. The words erupted with a fury that had been building for 20 years. Serafina looked at her sister and saw for the first time the wounded child beneath the ambition. The girl who had fought for every scrap of approval. The daughter who had never understood why her mother had not chosen her. Before she could respond, a horn sounded. 3 blasts, long, mournful, unmistakable. The fortress was under attack. The shadow hunters came through tunnels that should not have existed. They erupted from the ground in the eastern courtyard, their black blades gleaming in the torchlight, their movements coordinated with terrible precision. They were not a raiding party. They were an assassination squad, and they were heading straight for Serafina. The fortress exploded into chaos. Warriors grabbed weapons and rushed to defend. Alarms sounded from every tower. Kale's voice cut through the noise, commanding, directing, rallying his forces with the practiced ease of a born leader. Varen, take the eastern defenses. Do not let them reach the inner keep. He turned, his eyes finding Serafina across the courtyard. Get her to safety. But Ravenna was faster. She grabbed Serafina's arm and pulled her into a side corridor, away from the fighting, away from the warriors who would have protected her. This way, she hissed. I know a path. Serafina had no choice but to follow. They ran through twisting passages, deeper into the mountain, until they emerged in a small chamber far from the battle's noise. Ancient stonework surrounded them. Carved symbols covered the walls. And standing in the center of the room waiting was Elder Mordecai. Serafina understood. This was not a rescue. This was a trap. You brought them here, she said, turning to face her sister. You and Mordecai. You brought the Shadow Hunters to Iron Citadel. Ravenna's expression flickered. Something that might have been guilt, quickly suppressed. I did not know they would attack like this. Mordecai said it would be a demonstration. He said no one would be hurt. You believed him? I believed he wanted what I wanted, to see you exposed for what you really are. Mordecai laughed, a cold, hollow sound. What she really is, he said, stepping closer, is far more valuable than either of you understood. An oracle, the last of her kind. Do you know how much the Shadow Council will pay for her? Serafina's blood ran cold. He knew. Somehow he had known. Your mother thought she was so clever. Mordecai circled her. Sealing away your power. Hiding you in plain sight. But seals can be broken. And broken things can be sold. He gestured, and 2 shadow hunters emerged from the darkness behind him. The question is whether to break the seal here or deliver you intact. Serafina backed away, her mind racing. She was trapped, unarmed, alone except for a sister who had betrayed her and an elder who had sold his soul. Then do it here. The words came from Ravenna. Serafina turned to her sister in shock. Ravenna's golden eyes were fixed on Mordecai, and in them burned something unexpected. Rage. You said this would expose her weakness. You said she would be humiliated and sent away. You never said anything about selling her to monsters. Mordecai shrugged. Plans change. No. Ravenna stepped between Serafina and the Shadow Hunters. I wanted to beat her, to prove I was better. I never wanted this. She shifted. Her wolf erupted from her body, black and massive and radiating fury. She launched herself at the nearest Shadow Hunter with a snarl that shook the chamber walls. The fight was brutal and brief. Ravenna was powerful, but she was one wolf against 2 Shadow Hunters and an elder who had spent decades accumulating dark knowledge. She wounded one hunter badly before the other's blade found her side. She tore out Mordecai's throat before he could complete whatever spell he had been preparing. But as she turned to face the remaining hunter, she left her back exposed. Serafina saw the blade coming, saw her sister, too focused on the enemy before her, unaware of the death approaching from behind. She did not think. She moved. The black blade meant for Ravenna's heart found Serafina's back instead. The pain was absolute. Serafina felt the forbidden poison spreading through her veins. Cold and burning at the same time. Her legs gave out. She fell to the stone floor, blood pooling beneath her. Ravenna's scream echoed through the chamber. She killed the final hunter with a savagery that defied description, then dropped to her knees beside her sister. Why, she demanded, did pressing her hands against the wound. Why would you do that? Serafina's vision was fading. The world was becoming distant and strange. But she could still see her sister's face, twisted with grief and something she had never seen there before. Fear. Ravenna was afraid of losing her. Because you are my sister. The words came out as barely a whisper. Because I never wanted you to die, I just wanted you to see me. Tears streamed down Ravenna's face. I see you, she choked. I have always seen you. I just hated what I saw because it made me feel worthless. She clutched Serafina's hand. Please do not die, please. I am sorry for everything. Serafina felt the darkness closing in. Her wolf was howling somewhere deep inside, fighting against the poison. But it was not enough. The vial. The thought came from somewhere beyond the encroaching darkness. From her wolf, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. The vial around your neck. Serafina's hand moved weakly, fumbling for the cord that held her mother's preserved blood. Ravenna saw what she was reaching for. What is that? Our mother's blood, the seal that binds me. If it breaks in a moment of true need, she could not finish. The darkness was too close. But Ravenna understood. She grabbed the vial and smashed it against Serafina's wound, letting the ancient blood mingle with the fresh. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then light exploded through the chamber. Serafina arched off the stone floor, a scream tearing from her throat as power flooded through her veins. The seal shattered. Her wolf, bound for 20 years, finally erupted into being. She was not black like her sister, not gold like the common wolves. She was silver, pure and blinding, the color of moonlight itself. And in her mind, 1,000 voices spoke at once. The voices of oracles past, the accumulated wisdom of a bloodline that stretched back to the dawn of wolves. They showed her what she was. They showed her what she could do. They showed her the future. When the light faded, Serafina stood whole and healed, her silver wolf retreating back into her body, her eyes glowing with power that had not been seen in the world for a generation. She looked at her sister. I know where Kale is, she said. I know what is happening. I can see it. She extended her hand. Come with me. Help me end this. Ravenna took her hand. Together, the sisters ran back toward the battle. Together, they would face what came next. And somewhere in the chaos of the fortress, fighting desperately against enemies that should not have been able to reach him, Kale felt something impossible. His bond with Serafina, dormant since he had marked her, suddenly blazed to life. He felt her power, her awakening, her voice in his mind, clear and strong. I am coming. He smiled even as he cut down another shadow hunter. And for the first time in years, he believed that tomorrow might actually come. The bond between them blazed like a river of molten gold. Serafina felt Kael's presence in her mind with a clarity that stole her breath. She could sense his location, his emotions, his desperate fury as he fought against enemies that seemed to multiply with every passing moment. Through his eyes, she saw the eastern courtyard awash in chaos. Shadow hunters pouring from tunnels that should not exist. Iron Citadel warriors falling despite their legendary discipline. And she saw something else. The future. It came to her in flashes, bright and terrible, like images that flickered through her consciousness like lightning illuminating a dark landscape. She saw the path the remaining shadow hunters would take. The weak point they would exploit. The moment, 3 minutes from now, when they would breach the inner keep and everything would be lost. She also saw how to stop it. This way, she said to Ravenna, pulling her sister through corridors that twisted through the mountain like veins through flesh. We need to reach the armory before they do. Ravenna did not question, did not argue. She simply ran, her wolf's stamina carrying her forward despite the wounds she had sustained. Whatever had broken between them in that underground chamber had been replaced by something stronger. Something forged in blood and sacrifice. They reached the armory seconds before the Shadow Hunter advance team. Serafina saw them coming before they arrived. 4 hunters moving in perfect formation, their black blades hungry for blood. They intended to seize the weapons cache and arm the reinforcements that were still emerging from the tunnels. She could not let that happen. Ravenna shifted without being asked. Her black wolf materialized beside Serafina, hackles raised, eyes burning with the need to protect, to atone. The first hunter came through the door and died before he knew he was in danger. Ravenna's jaws closed around his throat with the precision of a striking serpent. The second managed to raise his blade before silver light erupted from Seraphina's palm and sent him crashing into the wall with force that shattered bone. The power was strange. New. Seraphina did not fully understand it yet, did not know the limits of what she could do. But her wolf guided her, and the voices of oracles past whispered instructions that her body obeyed before her mind could question. The third hunter tried to flee. Ravenna ran him down in the corridor. The fourth threw down his weapon and raised his hands in surrender. Seraphina looked at him with eyes that glowed silver, and she saw his past unfold like pages in a book. He was a weapon, not a monster, forged by tragedy into something sharp and deadly, but not beyond redemption. Bind him, she said to Ravenna. He may have information we need. Then she closed her eyes and reached through the bond to her mate. Kael, I can see them, all of them. I know where they are coming from and where they will strike next. His response came back instantly, wrapped in wonder and desperate hope. Tell me, she told him. The battle turned. With Seraphina feeding tactical information directly into Kael's mind, the Iron Citadel forces stopped reacting and started anticipating. They were waiting at tunnel exits before shadow hunters emerged. They flanked enemy positions that had been invisible moments before. They transformed from defenders into predators. Kael fought with renewed fury, his blades singing through the night. General Varen rallied the eastern defenses and pushed the invaders back into the very tunnels they had used to infiltrate. Warriors who had been on the verge of despair found fresh strength in the knowledge that their king could see the enemy's every move. But Seraphina saw something else as well. Mordecai was not dead. She had thought Ravenna killed him in that underground chamber. But the vision showed her the truth. He had used some dark magic to survive, to fake his death, to slip away while the sisters were distracted. Even now, he was crawling toward a hidden exit, clutching a communication device that would let him contact the Shadow Council. If he escaped, there would be no safety, no peace. The Shadow Hunters would return in force. Seraphina made her choice. She left Ravenna guarding the armory and ran. The passages blurred around her as she followed the thread of vision that showed her where Mordecai would be. She found him at the hidden exit, a narrow crack in the mountain, concealed behind centuries of rockfall. Mordecai was halfway through, his aged body struggling to navigate the tight space. Seraphina did not hesitate. Silver light blazed from her hands and sealed the crack with molten stone. Mordecai screamed as the heat washed over him as his escape route vanished. He turned, his face twisted with pain and fury. "You should be dead," he hissed. "The shadow poison should have killed you within minutes." Seraphina stepped closer, her eyes glowing, her power humming through every fiber of her being. "I am an oracle," she said. "Your poison cannot touch what the moon itself has blessed." Mordecai laughed, a broken, desperate sound. "You think that matters? The Shadow Council knows you exist now. They will come for you, Oracle. They will burn this kingdom and everyone in it. Then we will be ready for them," she said simply. Mordecai spat at her feet. "You understand nothing. I served this kingdom for 60 years. I held power that would make your pretty light tricks look like parlor games." Seraphina felt her oracle sight activate unbidden. The past opened before her like a wound, and she saw what Mordecai truly was. She saw the battle from years ago, the mountain pass running with blood, the moment when Kael led the charge to save the surrounded troops. And she saw Mordecai, not fighting, not holding the line, running. He had been part of Darius's unit, had been standing beside the king's brother when the enemy circled behind them. And when the choice came to stand and fight or flee and survive, Mordecai had fled. He had watched from hiding as Darius fought alone, had done nothing as the prince's blood stained the snow. "You were there," Seraphina said, her voice quiet with horror. "You were with Darius. You could have helped him." Mordecai's face went pale. "How do you know that?" "You fled while he died. You let the king's brother fall because you were afraid." She stepped closer, and now her voice carried the weight of every oracle who had come before her. "And you have spent all these years living with that guilt. That is why you betrayed us. Not for gold or power, Because you cannot stand to look at the king and see the brother you let die. Mordecai crumbled. The arrogance drained out of him like blood from a wound. He should have hated me, Mordecai whispered. But he never knew. No one knew. And every day I had to look at him and remember what I did. Tears streamed down his weathered face. I wanted him to suffer. Wanted his kingdom to fall. Because if he lost everything, maybe it would hurt less than watching him succeed while I rotted inside. Cale's presence filled the bond between them. She felt him approaching, felt his fury as he sensed what she had discovered. The king arrived with Varen and a dozen warriors at his back. The battle was over. The surviving shadow hunters had been killed or captured. The tunnels had been collapsed. Iron Citadel was secure, though the cost had been steep. Cale's golden eyes found Mordecai, and for a moment there was only confusion. Then he looked at Seraphina, and through the bond, he felt the truth. Everything. The color drained from his face. He crossed the distance to Mordecai in 3 strides and hauled the old man up by his throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. "You were there," Cale growled. "You were with my brother. You let him die." Mordecai did not struggle, did not try to explain. He simply hung in the king's grip, waiting for the death he had earned. Cale's hand trembled. Seraphina watched the war in his eyes, the rage that demanded blood, the grief that had never healed, the memory of a promise made to a dying brother. "Do not let your heart die with me." If he killed Mordecai now, in this moment of fury, it would be justice. But it would also be the darkness that had consumed him finally winning. Seraphina did not speak, did not try to influence his choice. This was his moment, his decision, his right. Cale's grip tightened. Then slowly, deliberately, he let go. Mordecai dropped to the stone floor, gasping for air. "I made a promise to my brother," Cale said, his voice rough with emotion. "He asked me not to let my heart die. For years I thought I had failed him." He looked at Seraphina. "Then I found her, and she showed me that it is not too late." He turned back to Mordecai. "I will not give you the death you crave. You will spend the rest of your days in the labor camps, breaking stone. You will have nothing but time to remember what you did." Varen stepped forward to take custody of the prisoner. As Mordecai was led away, Seraphina saw something flicker in his eyes. Not gratitude, but perhaps acknowledgement that she had saved more than his life. She had saved Cale's soul. Dawn broke over a fortress, transformed. The dead were gathered with honor, their bodies prepared for the funeral pyres that would release their spirits to the moon. Warriors who had fought through the night now stood silent watch over fallen brothers. But there was also something else in the air, something that had not been present in Iron Citadel for many years. Hope. Word had spread through the ranks. The Luna had awakened. She was an oracle, the last of her kind, blessed with power that could see through enemy deception. Seraphina felt their eyes on her as she walked through the courtyard. Warriors who had doubted her now inclined their heads with respect. Servants who had whispered about her weakness now fell silent with something like awe. She found Cale on the battlements, looking out over the mountain range. He did not turn when she approached, but she felt his awareness of her through the bond. The warmth that had begun to grow between them. "It is over." "It is over," she said quietly. "No." He finally turned to face her. "It is beginning. The Shadow Council will regroup. They will return. And when they do, we must be ready. We will be." "How can you be certain?" Because I have seen it." She moved to stand beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "Not the details, not the path we will take, but the destination. If we stand together, if we build the alliances we need, if we become what this kingdom requires us to be, we will survive. We will win." Cale was quiet for a long moment. "You speak of standing together." "Yes." He turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw something she had never expected to find there. Vulnerability. "When I claimed you in that stone circle, I told myself it was strategy. Told myself my wolf had simply recognized a tactical advantage. But I think I knew even then that I was lying to myself." He reached out and touched her face, his fingers gentle despite the calluses of a warrior. "You have changed everything, Seraphina. You have changed me. And I do not know how to tell you what that means. Because I have spent so many years forgetting how to feel anything at all. She covered his hand with her own. Then do not tell me. Show me. They came together slowly, two people who had learned to be cautious, who had been hurt too many times to rush into anything. But when his lips finally met hers, the bond between them blazed with a light that rivaled the rising sun. In that moment, there were no more walls, no more secrets. Just two souls that had found each other against impossible odds. The great hall had been prepared for judgment. Ravenna stood before the assembled leadership, her wrists bound, her head held high despite the circumstances. The wound she had sustained in the underground chamber had been treated, but she had refused to rest until this moment came. Until she faced the consequences of what she had done. Kale sat on his throne, Seraphina in the Luna's chair beside him. Lady Ravenna of Silver Vale, Kale began. You came to this fortress under false pretenses. You conspired with a traitor. You helped enemies infiltrate our walls. By any measure, you have earned death. Ravenna did not flinch. I have. Seraphina watched her sister. The proud woman who had tormented her stood diminished but not defeated. The hatred that had once defined her was gone, replaced by something more complicated. However, Kale continued, you also fought against the shadow hunters when the battle turned. You killed 3 of them personally, and you took the blow that would have ended your sister's life. He paused. The debt of blood is complicated. Seraphina rose from her chair. My sister and I have been at war since before we were born. Last night she brought enemies to our gate. These things are true. She walked toward Ravenna. But last night when the blade came from my back, she threw herself into its path. When I lay dying, she broke the seal that had imprisoned my power. She stopped before her twin. I do not ask for her to be pardoned, but I ask for her to be given what she never had before. A chance to earn her redemption. Kale's expression remained unreadable. What would you propose? Strip her of her title. Strip her of her position. Let her serve in the Iron Citadel army as a common soldier, starting at the lowest rank. Let her prove her worth through years of service. She met her sister's eyes. This is not mercy, Ravenna. This is consequence. Everything you were must be surrendered. You will start with nothing and build from there. Can you accept that? Ravenna was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly she dropped to one knee. I accept. Kale rose from his throne. Then it is decided. From this day forward, she is Ravenna, recruit of the Iron Citadel Guard. General Varen will assign her to a training unit. He descended from the dais and stood before the kneeling woman. If you betray us again, there will be no second chance. I understand, Your Majesty. Then rise, recruit. Your service begins now. The months that followed were filled with preparation. The Shadow Council did not immediately retaliate, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Iron Citadel worked tirelessly to strengthen its defenses, to train new warriors, to forge alliances with packs that had remained neutral. Seraphina threw herself into her role as Luna. She learned the names of every warrior. She studied the political landscape until she could navigate it as well as any ambassador. She used her oracle visions to identify threats before they materialized, preventing assassination attempts and uncovering spy networks. Her relationship with Kyle deepened in ways neither had expected. They had not begun with love. Their bond had been forged in necessity and cemented by shared trial. But somewhere in the long nights of planning and the quiet moments between crises, something had grown. He told her about Darius, about the guilt he had carried, the belief that he had chosen wrong. She told him about her mother, about the seal, about years of believing she was broken beyond repair. They learned each other's scars, and in learning them, they began to heal. 6 months after the Shadow Hunter attack, Ravenna completed her basic training. She had earned no special treatment, had received no recognition of her former status. She had scrubbed floors and dug latrines and run until her legs gave out. Varen's report was grudgingly positive. She has potential, he told Kale and Seraphina. Her combat skills were always impressive, but she had no discipline. That is changing. He recommended her for advancement to regular soldier status. Seraphina visited her sister that evening, finding her in the barracks, cleaning her equipment. Ravenna looked up when she entered. Luna. The title came naturally now, with genuine respect. Serafina sat on the cot across from her. Do you still resent me? Ravenna was quiet for a moment. I resented what you represented. The effortless love you received. But I never hated you, Serafina. I hated myself for not being enough. She set down the armor she was polishing. You were just the mirror that showed me everything I was not. We were both looking in wrong mirrors, Serafina said. We wasted 20 years fighting each other when we could have been allies. Can we start over? Ravenna asked. I know I have years of work ahead, but can we try to be something other than enemies? Serafina reached across and took her sister's hand. I would like that. The wedding was held at midnight under the full moon, not the blood moon of awakening. A simple full moon, bright and silver, hanging over Iron Citadel like a blessing from the goddess herself. There were no vast crowds, no foreign dignitaries, just the warriors of Iron Citadel gathered in the great courtyard, torches flickering in the night breeze. Serafina wore white, not an elaborate gown but a simple dress. Her hair hung loose, and the silver mark at her throat glowed softly in the moonlight. Kale wore black, the same black he always wore. They stood before the altar, where generations of kings had pledged their vows. I do not promise you happiness, Kale said quietly. I cannot control what the future brings, but I promise you this. Whatever comes, I will face it beside you. Whatever darkness rises, I will fight it with you. He lifted her hands to his lips. You are my Luna, my oracle, my partner in everything that matters, and I love you. She had waited so long to hear those words, not because she needed them to feel valued, but because they represented something she had never dared hope for. A love that was chosen, earned, built on foundation of mutual respect. I love you too, she said simply. But before he could kiss her, she placed her hand over her heart, then moved it to rest over his. There is something you should know. Something I have been waiting to tell you until this moment. Kale's brow furrowed slightly. What is it? Through the Pondabon, she let him feel what she had been sensing for weeks. The flutter of new life that had taken root inside her. The future she had seen in her oracle visions. A child with golden eyes and silver power. His eyes widened. You are certain? My vision showed me, she said smiling, but I wanted to wait for the right moment. And this is the right moment? Standing before everyone we love, promising ourselves to each other forever. She reached up to touch his face. Yes, this is exactly the right moment. Kale pulled her into his arms with a tenderness that belied his warrior's strength. When he kissed her, the courtyard erupted in cheers. And somewhere in the ranks of watching soldiers, a woman with black hair and golden eyes wiped tears from her face and smiled for her sister's happiness. Later that night, they stood together on the highest tower. The celebration continued below, but they had slipped away for a moment of quiet, of peace, of simply being together without the weight of crowns and expectations. What do you see? Kale asked, his arm around her waist, his hand resting gently over her stomach where their child grew. Serafina let her oracle sight unfold. The possible futures shimmered before her. Some led to darkness. Some led to light. Most led to struggle. But one thread gleamed brighter than the others. I see storms, she said, battles we have not yet imagined, losses that will break our hearts. She turned to face him. But I also see dawn. I see victory that will cost us everything and be worth every price. I see a future where our children inherit a world without shadow hunters. She smiled. I see us, Kale, together, always together. He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. Then that is enough, he said. That is everything. Below them, the fortress hummed with life. Warriors celebrated. Servants prepared for the future. Ravenna trained with her unit, earning her redemption one day at a time. And beyond the mountains, the Shadow Council plotted. But their plans would fail. Their darkness would break against the light that Serafina and Kale had built together. Because some bonds cannot be broken. Some loves cannot be defeated. And some stories, the ones forged in fire and sealed in moonlight, are destined to echo through eternity. The wind carried the sounds of celebration across the peaks. And the moon, full and silver and eternal, shone down its blessing on the Wolf Queen, and the king who had chosen her when no one else would. Their story was not over. But for now, in this moment of joy before whatever came next, there was love. There was hope. There was the promise of dawn. And that was everything.